Ahoy! This is part 3 of the Black Road Sky version 0.3 tutorial series. There's a link in the description for a free download of the game if you don't already have it. And in this video, we'll be performing a close-range rendezvous to make our way back to Gagarin Station, then learning how to dock. We are picking up right where we left off at the end of the last video, alone in the void, drifting away from home. Alright. So we are, let's see, hell yeah, 69, hey now, kilometers away from Gagarin Station now. Not too far to be able to see it. It's, there it is, you can see that sort of green blip behind me. So we can still see it, but it's fading fast, and soon it will be out of visual range. The techniques we're going to be using here will assume that it is out of visual range. You don't need to see the station in order to approach it. One thing I'll mention real quick, you'll notice I am currently on an impact trajectory with an altitude falling. Orbital mechanics are tough, and depending on like where you pointed your ship at the end of the last video, you may be in the same situation as me. We are working our way towards crashing into the planet. We've got plenty of time here to. I have plenty of time here. You may be in a situation where you don't, and that's why we, I keep telling you to save your game so you can reload every once in a while. We'll be talking a lot more about the orbital mechanics and what parry means and all of that later. So don't let yourself get overwhelmed by it right now. But if you crash into the planet, you just start over, I guess, is what I'm saying. Okay, so we're going to start by opening up our sensor display. If you haven't already, remember just this sends button here, and we will zoom out until we get a view of the station. So although we can technically still see the station, and you could try to eyeball it back in, it's a bad idea. It's much easier to rely on our instruments to lead us back in. So if as long as you find yourself in a situation sort of similar to mine, we are still close enough to the station that we don't have to worry about orbital mechanics, and we'll be performing what's called a close-range rendezvous with Gagarin. The general procedure that we're going to use here is going to become quite familiar to you if you stick with things. We'll match the target's velocity, we will burn towards it, and we will match velocities once again as we approach, and then repeat as needed. Match velocity, burn towards, match velocity. We're going to be doing this a lot. You may recall that in part 2 we matched velocities with the station by using our translation thrusters. Now if we try to do that now, so let's see, if I try to get my z velocity down by pressing K, we can see that this is it's taking way too long, right? It becomes quickly apparent that the translation thrusters simply aren't strong enough to do the job, and even with the tiny amount of fuel that they burn, I'm going to burn way too much, and I might collide with the planet before I have a chance to actually match velocities with the station. So what we'll want to do is use our main boosters instead. Now, since the boosters are limited to forward thrust, we'll need to start by orienting our ship. So first we'll take a look at the nav ball and look for this symbol. This marks the opposite direction of the station's relative velocity, or of our relative velocity to the station, which I will refer to as the station's relative retrograde velocity. And this is what we want to line our nose up with. This symbol is the relative prograde velocity of the station. If you find that one first, the relative retrograde velocity that we're looking for is on the exact opposite side of the nav ball. Just yaw around 180 degrees. That's what I'm going to do now. Yaw around, just looking at the nav ball here. There's the symbol I'm looking for. Tried to kind of stop myself on it. Get as close as I can. Hold tab. Cool. This gets us really close to the direction that we want to be pointing. Probably close enough in this situation, but the numerical readout here is much more accurate. So I'm going to go ahead and use my attitude controls to try and move. I think of it as moving all of my velocity to the negative z-axis. So I can pitch down a bit to move my y velocity over to this negative z. And I'll need to yaw a bit to move my x velocity and that should put me smack dab on that marker. So you don't even have to use that marker. You can just use the numerical readouts. I find it's easier to start by using the marker and then use the numerical readouts to get a little more accurate. These numbers are drifting. It's gonna happen. Don't worry too much about it. But now that all of our velocity is on the negative z-axis, we can throttle up. Remember, that's left shift to kill that velocity. It's really easy to overshoot, which I just did. I'm going to use my translation thrusters here to even that out, as well as the x velocity. Those are going to keep drifting. Don't worry about it. So we're more or less parked, but we're never going to get any close to the station unless we burn towards it. So again, I'm going to start with the nav ball. This pink symbol here, this is your direction, the direction pointing towards your current target. Our current target is the Gagarin station. We'll talk more later about targeting different stations. We are still targeting Gagarin. This pink circle is the direction directly towards it. And you can see that matches up with my sensor readout here. And just like velocity, we can dial this in with the slightly twitchy distance readout here. I want to get all of my distance on the positive z-axis. That means that the station is directly positive z in front of me. So I'll pitch a bit to get that. There we are. Before throttling up, let's take a moment to decide how quickly we want to approach. If we overshoot, we're going to have to repeat the whole process, so it's worth investing a little bit of patience. So in my case, your case will almost certainly be different, but in my case, Gagarin Station is 200 kilometers or so away. So, right, a speed of 1 kilometer a second will get us there in 200 seconds, more or less. And that's fine if we're trying to conserve fuel. I'm not really trying to conserve fuel here, so I'm going to say like a 2 kilometers per second or a little over 2 kilometers per second is pretty good. So I will. That's what I'm going to throttle up to. But remember that once we get close, we'll need to bring ourselves to a stop. We're not just gonna. If we don't do anything to stop ourselves, we're gonna blast right past the Gagarin station at 2 kilometers per second. So the most efficient way to stop ourselves will be to yaw the ship around 180 degrees and burn directly opposite the direction of our current motion. This, however, not always super convenient. The ship is equipped with thrust deflectors, which reverse the direction of the booster exhaust at the price of a small loss of efficiency. You can activate the boost deflectors with Z, the Z key on your keyboard by default, or by pressing that button. It takes them a little bit of time to engage, and once you do that, your boosters are working in reverse. So that's just a thing to keep in mind as we approach. I'm gonna do it, like I said, I'm just gonna throttle up here until my relative velocity is a couple of kilometers per second. Throttle her down. Activate thrust deflectors. Thrust deflectors are marked as active, and this red light comes on to warn you that you are in deflector mode. I added that big red light for my own benefit because I kept forgetting and then blasting off in the direction opposite to where I wanted to be. I'm watching my distance here. We're getting pretty close. Once I get to around 60 kilometers, I'm going to throttle up. And you can even see the boosters shooting out in front of me now. As my relative velocity decreases, we can see the station here. Coming in. We're going to put more effort in the future into making accurate rendezvous. I'm doing this pretty rough and ready here just to give you an idea of what the procedure looks like. And throttle down a bit. Remember it takes time to throttle down, so yeah, I still overshot. Okay, but not too bad. We can see the station now. We're only 20 kilometers or so away, and moving at a relative velocity of 70 meters per second or so. And while that wasn't the most accurate approach, it's good enough. We've got plenty of fuel left. If you've made it to this point, you're sort of kind of parked. You can see the station. It's just saving your game. And what we are going to do now is make our docking approach. We are essentially going to repeat the process that we just went through, which will begin by zeroing out our velocity. If my velocity was a little bit closer, I could do that with my translation thrusters. 73 meters per second. It's quite a bit. So I'm going to yaw around here. And then check the numerical readout to get it as close to get the X and Y as close to 0 as I have the patience to. And then before throttling up, always check this red light. I do not want deflectors on. Once those have closed, I can throttle up, and I'm just giving it a little bit of throttle here. I'm at 26, which is even maybe too much, and throttling down. Okay. Very nearly parked. I'm going to finish it off with my translation thrusters. So we are nicely parked 30 kilometers away from the station. We're still a good ways away. Yaw around, get the station more or less in front of me. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to throttle up a little bit. Kind of watch this number until it starts to scare me. I want to get my distance to 0. 6, 5, okay. Throttle down. I boost deflectors so that I'm ready to slow down once it approaches. Half a meter per second. I got 40 seconds. Okay. I am in danger of running directly into the station here, so I'm going to throttle up with my boost deflectors active. In general, it's a good idea to not actually point directly at the station as you approach, because unless if you're really on top of things, you could crash. The good news is I haven't not yet implemented a damage system, so you can't crash your ship. You can bounce off the station, though it would be a bad time. Alright, I don't think let me get rid of this sensor display for now. Okay, so we're real close now. I like to get within a kilometer before I really come in for docking. So I'm just going to notice I'm not pointing exactly at it. I'm pointing a little bit above. That's the landing platform. I want to be a bit above it in order to land. Throttling up. Letting the station drift towards me. I'm going to engage thrust deflectors. And I'm watching the relative distance to target. Once that dips below 1 kilometer, I'll go ahead and come to a stop. Okay, I'm happy with that. I'm going to use my translation thrusters now to zero out my relative velocity. Remember, your situation is going to be a little bit different. You're going to be coming at it from a different angle. You're going to be coming at it at a different velocity. You're going to. It's what I'm trying to show you is a generalized procedure here. Zero out your relative velocity, point towards the thing, move towards it at a speed that's not too fast that you can't slow down. Once you get there, repeat the process. And so here we are. I'm going to disengage these deflectors. Now we're ready to come in for a landing. So conveniently, every docking platform in the game is oriented parallel to the system's orbital plane and pointing quote-unquote up. What this means is that even if you don't see the landing platform, we can orient ourselves with it just by looking at the nav ball. We want to put ourselves on the horizon, like there. I'm going to use a little roll there to get myself even with the horizon. And let's see, maybe we can see if I press F1. It's hard to see, but you can sort of imagine there. That puts me parallel with the landing platform. But you don't need to be able to see it. In fact, I can't see it, and wherever you are, you probably can't see it either. So the first step, once you're this close and parked to to landing, is to orient yourself, even with the horizon black above you, white below you, like so. And if you're not above the platform at this point, just get there, right? So remember that the Y direction is up and down on your distance here. So a negative relative Y distance means you're above the platform. So if your relative Y is positive, get yourself, it's going to depend on your situation, how you get there. If you want to use boosters, if you want to use your translation thrusters, or what. But you want to get relative velocity as close to 0 as you can, distance to target inside of 1 kilometer, and your Y distance should be negative. Okay? So now we're aligned with the platform, we're above it. The next step is to center ourselves above the landing platform. This means getting our X and Z distances, relative X and Z distances, here, as close to 0 as possible. With practice, you'll be able to combine a lot of these steps, but for now I'm going to take things just one step at a time. I'm going to use my left and right translation thrusters to get my relative X distance as close to 0 as possible, and then I'll zero out my relative X velocity. That's the next step. So let's see. I can see that I need to come this way. So I give myself negative 15 meters per second relative X velocity. And you can see my relative X velocity here, coming closer and closer to 0. You can sort of imagine the docking platform somewhere down there. As I approach, I'm going to hit L, press L, slow down. I want to get there right about 0 at X distance. Okay, cool. And then we're going to do the same thing with Z. All right. Start slowing down. Keep slowing down. Okay, so we're about 1/3 of a kilometer above the center of the platform. But in order to dock, we need to get our relative X and Z velocities to 0 within a much higher tolerance than is available in maneuver mode. So if you try to get these X and Z velocities to 0, I mean, you might be able to do it if you push the right buttons. I'm pushing the wrong buttons. But it's quite difficult. I'm trying to get this Z velocity to 0, and everything I push overshoots. This is why docking mode exists. So we'll go ahead and switch into docking mode. My X velocity, just by chance, is already 0, but let's say it wasn't. It's much easier now to get it to 0. I'm going to get my Z velocity push the right button, get my Z velocity to 0 as well. There we go. In docking mode, our distance also changes from kilometers to meters. Note that. Now, in order to be granted access to the station, we need to land within 10 meters of the center of the platform. In my case, I've been jibber jabbering. I've been explaining all the stuff I'm doing. I've drifted quite a ways away on the Z axis here. So I'm going to try to, before I do anything else, because I'm trying to just do things one step at a time. Let's get that Z distance closer to 0. That's great. That's great. So now I really am very nearly above the center of the platform. My X and Z velocities are 0. What I need to do now is head down. Before I do that, just to be safe, I'm going to deploy my landing gear. You can deploy your landing gear at any time, but you want to do it before you touch down. I'm going to hold U. This far away, you may want to make this maneuver in maneuvering mode. But this works too. Touchdown. We've landed, but we're not docked until we activate the docking magnets, which we do by pressing the mags button. And now, as long as we're within 10 meters of the platform's center, we can press hail and they should accept our request. We're home. You can breathe now. Press F to get up out of the seat, and hey, if you manage to get your ship docked, give yourself a pat on the back. That's not easy. On the other hand, if things went sideways, don't despair. It's supposed to be a challenge. It's a skill to be mastered. Give it another shot. Keep practicing. And if you failed, it's probably because I did such a good job of explaining things. Hey, covered a lot in this video. Do it again if you need to. And when you're ready, I'll catch you in part 4, where we'll finally get to doing a little space trucking. And hey, visit another space station. This game includes an entire solar system, multiple planets, moons, space stations around each one. So lots left to learn, lots left to do. Thanks for sticking around this far, and I'll see you in part 4.